Okay, can we start?
Yep.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Xiyan, and I'm team leader of Team 9. Our project focuses on developing a strategic investor matching and funding pathway for Air Future Group AFG. Rather than simply funding investors, our goal was to identify investors whose priorities and funding methods align with AFG's technology and commercialization strategy. This presentation is a result of the combined efforts of our team members 伊田西成、书豪、孟卓、程一, and myself. As shown in our agenda, we first examine the industry context and energy storage challenge, then introduce AFG's technology and showcase projects. Next, we analyze investor matching opportunities and finally present our recommendations and funding roadmap. So, welcome Ethan to talk about her part. Hi, Ethan. Your microphone.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Yitan. Before discussing financing opportunities, we first need to understand the industry background and why energy storage has become so important. Over the past decade, the installed capacity of renewable energy in Australia and even the world has achieved rapid growth. However, the challenging of energy transition are no longer just about producing renewable electricity. The greater challenge is how to store, manage, and transport these energy sources. Also, the price of solar and wind energy are becoming more affordable. They are also intermittent. Therefore, energy storage is becoming a key driver for renewable energy to be connected to the grid integration. At the same time, Australia is accelerating its renewable energy goals, net zero emission commitments, and grid modernization plans. The energy storage and energy resilience are becoming for the attention of governments, investors, and energy suppliers. Uh, If energy storage becoming so important with the exciting technology completely solves this problem, we mainly analyze two technologies. The first is the batteries. Batteries dominate the energy storage market and are very effective in short-term energy storage. However, batteries still face some limitations, including limited storage time, performance decline over time, and relatively high costs for long-term storage. Next is the pump energy storage. Pump and can provide large-scale energy storage capacity, but it requires suitable geographical conditions and impacts environment. Therefore, neither of these technologies can fully meet the growing demand for scalable, flexible, and distributed energy storage solution. This has caused a market gap. But Air Future Group's modular compressed air energy storage technology can meet these requirements and complement existing technologies. The demand for energy storage solution will continue to grow in the future. This is mainly driven by three major trends. The first is the rapid growth of artificial intelligence data centers. According to International Energy Agency, by 2024, the global power demand for data centers will reach approximately 415 terawatt hours. So data centers require high reliable 24-hour power supply and continuously improving energy resilience. The second trend is the increasing demand for energy resilience. Extreme weather events will put more pressure on power infrastructure. Therefore, governments and infrastructure investors pay more attention to building resilient energy system and backup energy capabilities. The third trend is the transformation of the energy system. The future power grid is expected to shift from a highly centralized model to a more decentralized energy system. This transition will require greater flexibility and scalable energy storage technologies. After determining the industry background, next person will explain how Air Future Group's technology is strategically positioned to seize opportunities.
I will walk you through how AFG is strategically positioning its technology to save the biggest limits in energy storage. First, we have modular compressed air energy storage, or say AES. Standard chemical batteries have short lifespans and risk overheating or catching fire. This system uses direct physics and compressed air instead. This gives us a highly scalable, long-lasting storage option with zero risk of overheating and no reliance on expensive battery raw materials. Next, we have trigeneration matrix advantage. While traditional technologies can only give you electricity back, AFG system optimizes direct physics forces to deliver three different utilities at the exact same time from a single footprint. It provides clean energy, heating, and cooling loops. This makes the system incredibly efficient for commercial users who need more than just power. Third, we focus on distributed regional centralized factory that can easily be hit by global supply chain disruptions. We use a decentralized component design. By moving our production closer to the actual installation sites, we boost local industrial output and maximize grid energy resilience. To the next slide. Now, moving on to the next slide, how do we actually bring this to the market? We use a showcase to replication model. This means we target specific sectors facing extreme energy stress. Proof our tech works with a showcase project, and then replicate that exact blueprint across the globe. We are targeting three major application pathways, which are AI data centers, microgrids, and regional manufacturing, and Olympics mobility pilot. So the first one would be the market stress. Here is for the AI data centers, the market stress is huge. Rapidly growing AI workloads demand absolute 24/7 power resilience and high density heat management. Our trigeneration tech is a perfect match because it delivers clean electricity alongside server grade cooling co-located directly at the data node. For the second point, isolated networks are highly vulnerable to extreme weather and rising fuel transport costs. AFG solves this by establishing self-reliant distributed storage cells that secure local grids and factories during severe climate stress events. And for the Olympics mobility pilot, a high-profile global events put intense loads on local infrastructure and require fast charging, zero emission transit networks. Our rapidly deployable mechanical as a dynamic visual pilot that can license and replicate globally. By focusing on these clear strategic pathways, we show investors that AFG isn't just an idea, it's a repeatable infrastructure solution. I'll pass this on to the next person.
Okay. Through our research, we found that funding opportunities fall into three major categories: grants, public finance, and venture capital. However, these funding sources have different objectives. Grant providers focus on innovation and the environment impact. Public finance focuses on scalability and risk mitigation, while venture capital investors seek growth potential and commercial returns. We then evaluated investors against four criteria: sector relevance, project stage, geography focus, and mandate alignment, and ensure a target shortlist. The key insight from our analysis is that fundraising size depends less on the number of investors approached and more on the quality of strategic fit. For next page, after that, we applied an investor matching framework, include 4 steps to determine which opportunities provide the strongest strategic alignment for AFG. An important finding from our research is that investors evaluate opportunities differently depending on their mandate. For example, ARENA is interested in innovation, emissions reduction, and demonstration outcomes. This makes it highly aligned with AFG's clean energy objectives. However, the challenge is that competition is extremely high, meaning AFG must provide strong evidence of measurable impact and technical validation. In contrast, CEFC focuses on commercial deployment and financial sustainability. While this creates a pathway for future growth, it also requires stronger evidence of business viability and implementation capability. This reveals an important insight. Investor fit is not determined by funding availability alone. It is determined by whether project maturity aligns with investor expectations. For next page, based on these findings, we recommend a blended finance strategy. Instead of relying on a single funding source, AFG should use different forms of capital sequentiality as the project penetrates. The recommended pathway begins with great funding to validate technology and demonstrate impact. Once technical credibility is established, public finance and venture capital can be used to support commercial scalability and market expansion. To implement this strategy, we propose a plan. In the first month, AFG should strengthen its investment narrative, prepare supporting evidence, and refine its pitch materials. Between months 1 and 3, the focus should shift towards investor engagement and target applications. Between months 3 and 6, attention should move towards pilot validation, partnership development, and funding conversion. Our recommendation is therefore not simply a list of investors, but a structured funding pathway that aligns capital source with AFG's long-term growth objectives.
Next one is Mengzhuo.
Okay, hello everyone. My section explains how Australia funding opportunities match different stage of AFG conversation pathway. ARENA is the strongest match for AFG First Australia Showcase. It focuses on renewable energy innovation and energy storage alliance with AFG modular compressed air storage technology. An AFG showcase could demonstrate value in distribution energy markers grids or reliance focus application. However, ARENA would still require evidence include a credible hot set, measurable performance, renewable energy business, and a pathway to replication. Therefore, AFG should approach ARENA with one focus showcase proposal rather than a broad technology pitch. CEFC fit a later stage and the investment institution, it becomes more relevant once AFG has reduced technology risk and can show validated performance, customer dynamic, and repeatable project economics. So ARENA can help AFG prove the models, while CEFC may help finance future scale and replication. For the next page is from technology to scalable deployment. AFG should therefore use a stage blind finance pathway instead of depending on one founder. First, the Australia R&D tax incentive can reduce the eligible deployment cost during testing and performance improvement. It is not an investor, but it support early technical progress. Second, the arena could support a showcase that demonstrate the technique and commercial value. Third, state value opportunities such as Western Australia's Clean Energy Future Fund and Victoria's Energy Innovation Fund could be matched to the project location and local business. Include reasonless clean energy deployment or manufacturing. Finally, after the successful showcase, CEFC and private co-investors become stronger candidate for large-scale deployment. Overall, AFG should not contact as many funders as possible. It should secure the right showcase, generate invest advance and use one successful Australia project as a foundation for commercial replication. Okay, the next part is he's not coming.
Okay, our technology and project closely match the focus areas of leading international investors. For example, Masequence supports deep tech commercialization, where our scalable energy resilience solutions provide a strong fit. Breakthrough Energy focuses on decarbonization and clean energy, align well with our low carbon energy storage technology. Climate infrastructure funds are looking for infrastructure projects, which is exactly the pathway AFG is pursuing. And based on this analysis, we recommend a strategy built on government support, blended finance, and long-term investor partnerships. The first step is to use pilot projects and government banking to demonstrate technology and commercial viability. We can then leverage blended finance by combining grants, public funding, and private capital to reduce risk and attract larger investments. Finally, establishing long-term partnerships with global investors will support commercialization, scaling, and replication of future projects. So, moving to our commercialization roadmap. We recommend a stepped approach. AFG should first validate its technology, then develop or showcase projects supported by demonstration funding such as ARENA. Successful projects create evidence and credibility, which can attract larger investors such as CEFC and other strategic partners. The final stage is commercial scale up and replication. The key message is simple: demonstrate once, then replicate many times. In conclusion, our research highlights that energy transition is increasingly limited by storage challenges, and AFG's compressed air energy storage technology can help address the gap. We found that successful fundraising depends on matching project outcomes with investor mandates rather than approaching as many investors as possible. A planned funding pathway combine government support and strategic investment provides the strongest pathway for future growth. That's all. Finally, on behalf of Team 9, I would like to sincerely thank our client, John Maneka, for his guidance and industry insights, and our academic mentor, Neil, for his valuable feedback throughout this project. I would also like to thank all Team 9 members for their hard work and collaboration. Thank you very much for listening. Yeah, and here's our references. That's all. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Zee, for leading the team.
Is there any question for us or some feedback?
Yeah, no, I think you've done extremely well, and identified quite a lot of the issues and so forth, bearing in mind the complexity of the project and also your limitations, because you can't actually go and speak to people. So you can't go and speak to Arena or any of those other funds. The exercise, when you bring it from the research into the reality, takes on board some additional factors that have been excluded from you, such as dealing with the people and dealing with the sweet spots, what I call sweet spots, within funds that are not readily available publicly or via the website or via their promotion, because they're people related. But before you can get to that people related sweet spot thing, you need to have the platform. And that's what this project has done and is doing, well, has done, sorry, because we've reached the end of it, very well. What am I talking about? If you look at a company, let's just take any company, let's take Breakthrough Energy. And I'm talking about the global Breakthrough Energy here, right? Who are the people and what do they do? And everybody knows Bill Gates is one of them. But who are the other ones, and where are they located, and what's their area of interest, etc., or so forth? And how much money can they afford to lose, and how much money do they need to make? And those sort of quite difficult areas. Now, we have a major consideration, which you'll actually find that most companies do have, and that's the difference between looking externally versus looking internally. Now, in your presentation, you correctly allude to a number of different factors where one attributes them, they can actually fit into internal versus external. For example, in our business, we have some very, very capable technical resources and developers and so forth. PhD, engineers, etc. and so forth, blah, blah, blah. But where is the experience, and is there experience in taking that into commercialization and generating replicable earnings? And how does one go about that? Or has that been left as a gap? Now, to implement your excellent findings in your project, we as a company need to sort out the match between internal and external. And I can tell you here and now, between the 10 of us, 11 of us, whatever there is, that is a challenge. That is a challenge. Now, we're off the beaten track a little bit here, but that can affect what investors you go to. For example, I was talking to somebody the other day who had $100 million parties wanting to invest $100 million. Now, what would you say? Now, I said to them, yes, absolutely, let's talk. My colleague said to me, you've got to be off your rocker. There's no way we can use $100 million. Now, that's where you need insight, because I'm not suggesting we use $100 million. What I'm suggesting is we develop our relationship with parties who can use $100 million, and then they give us 5 or 10, such as AI, such as Olympic, such as Resilient, such as the energy companies, and the list goes on and on. Now, what's the point I'm making? The point I'm making is that there are actually guidelines, but not necessarily finite rules. You actually have quite a lot of flexibility to be innovative in the finance, let alone innovative in the technology. And the projects go the same way. If you're doing a transport project with Olympics, that's very different to bringing out from Europe a golf cart, which is probably one of the first things we would do, because that's touchy-feely, you can see it, you can see what's going on, etc., and so forth. So one funding project is about a product showcase, another is about a market showcase. Then you can have projects that are just about sheer, unadulterated disasters and problems and challenges, such as AI, such as blackouts, such as weather, etc., or so forth. Now, the fundamental rule, I think, is that one solution does not fit all. So therefore, matching of investors and showcases and clients such as us becomes a complex exercise in a case like ours, but not necessarily in most cases. So if you've got a software program that you want to promote through venture capital, etc., so forth, it's pretty straightforward. But you've got global energy solutions at high scale that you want to implement, or singular products that are capable of tri-generation, or vehicles that will service whole networks or whole distribution centres and so forth. Where Neil and I live in the Gold Coast, the Olympic Games are going to span the whole of that Gold Coast, and the hinterland, and Brisbane, which is the major city other than the Gold Coast city. Now, how do you do that? You've got to focus on infrastructure. How do you focus on infrastructure? Well, in the case of clean, which you're going to have by 2032, or you're going to want to demonstrate to the world, in the case of clean, you've got limitations. For example, the range. You've got the energy infrastructure with regards to refilling or recharging or so forth. Now, unfortunately in the industry, the investors are not as clever as you and I might like to think. And that includes ARENA, and that includes CEFC, etc., and so forth. And they probably recognise that. CEFC, for example, has a relationship with the venture capital company called Virescent, whose task is to identify and analyse innovative and new technology. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily all that expert, but they're certainly more expert than ARENA. Now, what are you competing against? You're competing against the sort of mentality and style that does the pumped hydro Snowy scheme, which to start with was a $2 billion project, which quite frankly left out a lot of things, including the transmission, etc., and so forth. It jumped 2 to 12. Now, unless you're the wealthiest person in the world, jumping from 2 to 12 is a pretty significant jump. But then it kept jumping. And I don't know that it's actually stopped jumping. So you're going from 2 billion to 12 billion to 20 billion, and you still got to do transmission. But most importantly, you've still got to solve problems. And one of the things we said as a team is that in the problem solving, we may very well move to more decentralization. Now, how does a centralized snowy scheme 2 of pumped hydro work with decentralization if decentralization means you're edge of grid or off grid? And the answer to that is they don't. So this movement towards the future of decentralization has its opposition within parties like the ARENAs and the AGL and Origin Energy and Western Australian Energy and others and so forth. And they wield a lot of big stick because they're government, they're big funds and so forth, etc., etc. But who wields a bigger stick? Who wields a far, far, far bigger stick? The biggest stick in the world at the moment, AI. So the philosophies of AI are going to change or potentially influence the whole operation, the whole network, the whole shebang. So does AI have a clean plate on how to go about things? No, because they've got an opposition. And that opposition is called government voters. So the government can overrule the monetary aspect of the AI. So you've now got a conflicting environment. So what's all this mean? This means that one needs to go into investors at the next stage beyond what you good folks have achieved so far, which has been great. One needs to now say, how's everybody think? And who are the thinkers? Take, for example, Queensland Investment Corporation, which is one of the biggest government fund managers. Now, traditionally, you couldn't talk to them because they're only the big end of town. Now they also include venture capital. So that opens up a new door. If you now think about AI, you've got a situation where Queensland would love to do AI. And please tell me if we're running short of time here because I'm just blah, 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 blah. Did you folks have any questions, by the way, yourself? Because I'm just talking. Can you hear me?
No, I don't think we have some question for this project because we already collected so many informations about that. But I don't think I think, do you have some question for us? Oh,
No, not really. It's a combination of a learning exercise and an experimental exercise in conjunction with helping a client out in a particular area of client interest. And I think you've tackled both of those extremely well. On projects, they sort of think, oh, I wonder how that's going to go.
thank you.
I've made a suggestion. I wonder what's going to happen to my ingestion, or is it just going to go into the bottom drawer? And the answer to that is definitely not going to go into the bottom drawer. But how does one then work with it? So I guess what I'm saying is that within the many different elements of your project and across the presentations, there is overlap and collaboration and matching and so forth. So we will be, I'm just using Queensland example because I'm close to it. We will be talking to all the Lord Mayors, and we will be talking to the Premier's Department, etc. And we'll be talking to the Olympics Committee. And we'll be talking to the private parties who are looking to promote AI. Independent funders and so forth, both domestically and around the world, who are interested in this whole area. And then we're going to try and look at pulling it together. Now, subject to a few caveats, we're not too concerned with where the money comes from. So if the money comes from the investors, or the money comes from the government, or the money comes from the partners who are actually operating like AI, it doesn't matter too much, although obviously the deals matter. But the vested interest to some extent will determine the deals. AI, for example, has an enormous energy need, but they've got some very, very severe limitations. And one of those limitations is timeline. They don't have much time. Another limitation is ecology and politics, of being able to put data centers somewhere where it's not too obtrusive and doesn't buck up the whole community. And let me tell you, the community is not convinced of that just yet. So you've got problems all around the world with data center rollout. Now, if we can come along and say, no, we're not looking at working directly with you, the data center, because that requires site-constrained scale. But we can help you on the political side with regards to the community by providing mid-range, modular and scalable duration, which is able to capture the energy that you produce, or a proportion of it, for a rainy day, which removes your responsibility when it becomes a rainy day, to use that expression. And that's something that is very difficult to do at the moment around the world, at a time when AI data centers and AI in general are about to skyrocket. Why is it so difficult to do? Because you can't rely on the grid. Because the grid often delivers you blackouts. And you get blackouts because of transmission lines being down, or so forth, etc., etc. Batteries don't have the long duration as you identified within your report. We do. So we can provide solutions. Now, what's the point that I'm making to the team? The point that I'm making to the team is, I think you've done a terrific job. But you've been very limited by not being able to go out and talk to the investors and all this sort of stuff, etc., etc. But that's the nature of the project. So you can only do what you're allowed to do under the university's auspices and the liabilities that you need to avoid, etc., or so forth. And it's not a world that you want to get into too quickly, quite frankly, because it's quite difficult and quite frustrating. If you take your project, can you now use that project as an input into the real world? And the answer is definitely yes. Definitely yes. Why? Well, firstly, this project is not constrained in telling you what it's all about. And the project does exactly that. The project makes suggestions like, for example, don't just simply produce a list, but create a process pathway. I was born an engineer, so I love processes and I love pathways. And a lot of people just jump in. Okay, let's find 100 investors. Tonight we've got 100 investors, but have you got a pathway? Because if you don't have a pathway, You're going to go down a journey of saying, no, thank you, you're too early. No, thank you, you can't compete against batteries. No, thank you, we need something a little bit larger. No, thank you, blah, blah, blah. You're too inefficient, etc., and so forth. You have to have a pathway and you have to have a process. And if you're going to have a pathway and a process, then you need to know what goes in and what you want to go out. So what goes in, you have identified very well within your project. What goes out needs to be a little bit dynamic and variable to be able to match the circumstances. If you subscribe like I do to AI and green energy and electric vehicles and all the rest of it, you realize how fast things are changing and that you need to adapt. Vehicles went from a stage quite recently where they were dropping off in sales, etc., and so forth. Now, since the Iran war and the Strait of Hormuz and so forth, etc., they're climbing right back up again. Is that favourable or unfavourable for us? Well, the answer is it's favourable, but only if you pitch it in the right way. If you want to get on the tailcoats of Tesla or BYD or something like that, then you're going to find that really tough. But if you use their escalation in sales and the problems that can create as long as the good things, then you will find that a great tailwind. So let me close off there because I'm not sure what the time is, unless you've got any other particular topics to touch on. And let me just, before we say that, say to you, thank you very much for your interest in this rather complicated area, the difficulty in some of the words with regard to the language and of course the complexity. And I think you've done a wonderful job and I think you've worked wonderfully as a team. And thank you to Neil and his contribution to the project. And I'm assuming that over the course of the next day or two,